Welcome to News Onces, where we bring your neighborhood article to life. 1 in 4 Americans say violence against the government is sometimes okay. Nearly a quarter of Americans say it's sometimes okay to use violence against the government, and 1 in 10 Americans say violence is justified right now. That's the finding of a new report by the COVID States Project, which asked 23,000 people across the country whether it is ever justifiable to engage in violent protest against the government. Nearly 1 in 4 said violence was either definitely or probably justifiable against the government. A similar percentage of liberals and conservatives agree on this point. That's not surprising when you think about how American history is taught, said COVID States Project co-director David Lazer. You know, we begin with the American Revolution against an illegitimate government, and so we are, in a sense, taught from grade school that it is at some points in history justifiable to engage in violent protest. The COVID States Project typically asks questions about Americans' COVID-related policy preferences and behaviors, whether they understand what kinds of masks are better at filtering viral particles, for instance, or what they think about vaccine mandates. But in the current political climate, COVID questions aren't too far removed from questions about violence, Lazer said. Before the election in 2020, we were looking at both beliefs around the anticipated legitimacy of the election, as well as things like vote modality, because obviously how people voted was determined in part by COVID. We see it all in part as a package with what has happened over the last 2 years to American society. The survey also found that 1 in 10 Americans say violence is justified right now. Republicans and ideological conservatives are most likely to say, violent protest against the government is justifiable right now, the report found. Among Republican men, the figure rises to nearly 1 in 5. 2/3 of those who believe violent protest is justified say the federal government is an appropriate target. About 1/3 direct their ire at state governments. If you like this video, please subscribe. We post more of what you like. Unfortunately, these survey findings are not at all surprising, Rachel Kleinfeld, who was not involved in the survey, says the findings are consistent with other recent polling. Last year, a University of Chicago poll found almost 1 in 10 Americans believed the use of force was justified to restore Trump to the presidency after he lost. And in December, The Washington Post and University of Maryland together found that 1 in 3 Americans think violence against the government is sometimes justified. The number of Americans who support violent political protests have doubled over the last decade, she said. There are a lot of instances we can think of where violent protests against the government could very well be justified, he said, pointing to the Warsaw Ghetto riots against the Nazis, or the civil rights movement in the U.S., and that is going to vary quite dramatically from what we saw on January 6.